Welcome to the Love Mother podcast. I'm your host, Kate Isaac, and I hope to encourage, equip, and inspire you, busy mama, to live out your motherhood with fearless faith and powerful purpose. I know motherhood can be busy, overwhelming, and mundane, but there is another way, a motherhood full of joy and abundance. When we remove focus from worldly distractions and live our lives in the fullness of Christ, we discover the women and mothers God created us to be. Join me for open and honest discussions and interviews about gospel truths, motherhood, family, home, foster care, and adoption. This podcast invites God right into the beauty and busy of mom life and was created for mamas who crave more. More joy, more impact, more purpose, more Jesus. Let's dive into today's episode. Hello, beautiful mama, and welcome back to another episode of the Love Mother podcast. I'm your host, Kate Isaac, and this is episode 15. And today we are talking with special guest, Lindsey Maestas from the Living Easy podcast. I first discovered Lindsey on her old podcast, the Milk and Honey podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast. And even though she's not producing new episodes, the episodes still live on. So definitely go and check those out there, as well as her new podcast. I know you'll be super blessed by it. But Lindsey is a podcaster and a blogger and just an overall awesome person to follow on social media. She's honestly just a breath of fresh air in this space. And she's such an encourager. She brings a lot of valuable information. You can tell she puts a lot of time into the content that she creates. And I just really appreciate her as a person, and I was super excited to have her on my show. So we are continuing in this series about being intentional with social media and glorifying God. And I have an episode coming next week, which really dives deep into this and my thoughts and feelings and just things that I've researched along the way when talking about this topic. But I really want you to hear from Lindsey, the good, the bad, and honestly, just to present her work to you as a perfect example as to someone who talks about everyday life on social media and within her business, but she glorifies God in everything she does. She's continually encouraging people and pointing them to Christ. And I just admire and value that so much about her. So I know you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. So enough of me talking. We're going to dive right in. Just a quick little side note. I had a baby in a very squeaky swing. So if you hear these little squeaks, I couldn't edit them out. I didn't realize how loudly they were being recorded throughout our interview. But as a working mom, sometimes I just need to get things done when I can get things done. And when the baby is napping in a swing, I just got to go for it. For show notes and more information and links to Lindsey's social media platforms, blog, podcast, all of that, head to my blog, lovemotherblog.com/podcast episode 15. That's the numbers 15 for more information and show notes. And if you guys enjoy this episode, I would be so appreciative if you head to the Love Mother podcast page on iTunes and leave a rating and a review. It's the best compliment you could give this podcast, and it helps other like-minded mamas to find it and get connected to this ministry. So thank you guys. You guys are awesome. I love you all. And if you enjoy this and you want to share this on social media, I would love if you screenshot this episode, tag myself, tag Lindsey, and let me know what value you received, or if you learned something from this specific episode. I would just appreciate that so very much. So without further ado, here is Lindsey. Welcome to the podcast, Lindsey. I'm super excited to have you on. I discovered you actually not that long ago through the Milk and Honey podcast, and I was kind of sad to hear it go, but I know you've got some exciting things that you're going to share with us. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a crazy season. We said goodbye to Milk and Honey. For those of you who didn't follow Milk and Honey, it is a faith-based podcast where we talked about really hard-hitting topics. And the beautiful thing is that the podcast episodes will still be up on Spotify and iTunes and everything. But we got to a place, I was doing it with a friend from Florida, and our schedules are literally the exact opposite. And then our time zones are different. And so it just became really difficult to maintain. And we honestly got to a place where we felt like God had used us for the season that he wanted to use us. Yeah. And so we touched on pretty much anything you could think of. We're like, honestly, we haven't missed much. So if you think of a topic, it's there. But then now I'm starting the Living Easy podcast, and that has been, it's just really, really cool because it's still faith-based. I still dive deep. That's just my personality. Yeah. But then I'm able to do practical, lifestyle things to help people who just want a little bit of help sometimes and don't want to do life alone. So yeah, it's exciting.
That's so exciting. I know you have a few podcasts. It just really came out yesterday, right?
Yes.
At the time of this recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't listened yet, but I'm super excited. I'm going on an 8-hour road trip to Chicago tomorrow, so I'm going to download all the episodes and get caught up.
It's so sweet too. So one thing we did with Milk and Honey, they were a little bit longer, and we got some people really loved that.
Yeah.
But then we would find that a lot of people wouldn't finish the episodes because they were just like too long. So with Living Easy, I am trying. I am a lengthy person, as you'll find in this interview, but I'm trying to keep them concise, like 20, 25 minutes, so that you can listen and finish them. That's really important to me, because I feel like you want to get all of the content in there, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, well, you talked a little bit about the podcast, but where did you get started with this whole online ministry? I guess I should maybe explain to you that I'm doing a series on the podcast about being intentional with social media, and I'm reaching out to some of my favorite people that I follow on social media, which is you. Even though I've only followed you for a short time, I just like connect so much with what you share and the way you speak. And how did you get started in this whole online blogging ministry world?
Sure. So I'll try to keep it short. So I was sitting on my couch. Literally, I remember the moment. I was sitting on my couch covered in spit up from my first baby. I was 9 months in to having a new kid, and I had postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. I felt like I was a horrible mom because my anxiety made me fearful of everything, including my son. And so I got to a point where I realized, like, I need to do something for myself, but I also don't ever want anyone in my sphere to feel like they're alone in this. And I didn't feel like I was alone. I have a really solid community. But I think in the moments when you're just by yourself, there's something to be said for having someone to go to and just be like, what has she written lately? Or like, what has she said? And I studied journalism in college, and I've had a lot of people, and I believe this is totally Jesus, like stop and specifically tell me, hey, you need to start a blog, or you need to start something that reaches multitudes. And that's totally God. And so I finally said, fine, I'll be obedient. I was terrified of failure. I was terrified of putting myself out there. I don't know if you follow the Enneagram, but I'm a type 3, which is like the achiever. That means I like to do, and I don't like to mess up. But also it was really humbling to say, okay, God, this isn't mine anyways. This is yours. And I want to reach out, and I want to do something that makes me feel purposeful. I know motherhood is purposeful. I stay at home most of the time, and that's my heart. But also to feel like, for me personally, my conviction was I felt pulled to do more ministry outside of my home as well. And so that's how it started. And it kind of blew up because I'm really vulnerable, and people aren't always used to being super vulnerable. Like my parents didn't like the content I shared. Like, Lindsey, rein it in, feel it in. It's not good. But it reached women because I was candid, and I wasn't afraid to talk about the junk I have chosen to do in my life and how God has redeemed those things. And that's how it kind of grew into what it is now.
Oh, amazing. So you started with the blog, and then the podcast came after, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I started that. I realized people don't read as much as I wish they did.
Yeah.
And you can't write as much in a blog as you can say on a podcast. And I wanted to get all of my thoughts across, but not in less than like 700 words. And so podcast was the next step.
I totally relate to that. That's exactly why I started mine too, because I would write these like lengthy blog posts, and it's just like, yeah, I know, like in this day and age, people want fast and quick. They're not consuming all of that. They're not getting the whole message of what I want to share. So I totally get you on that. So let's talk a little bit about, you say you're vulnerable and you share a lot of the, the nitty gritty stuff and stuff that your parents don't necessarily want you to share. But what about like speaking boldness and speaking truth in an online space? Like, I'm sure you get maybe some negative feedback, some positive feedback, but let's just talk a little bit about speaking truth and being bold in this space.
Sure. I just think it's so important to be real. And I honestly think that the social media space is navigating more toward realness now, because people are so sick of the fake stuff that you see pictures of people's stretch marks blowing up and going viral because it's refreshing to see. There's a reason that virality is there, is because people need that. And so I think we are going more in that direction, which I appreciate so much. And I think the more we do it, I pray that we don't become numb to it, because it's so important to validate people. I think doing that, not in a false, shallow way, but to validate their willingness to put themselves out there for the comfort of other people. Sin and pain in my life that I want to comfort others in their lives as well. And so to speak the gospel, to share the gospel, and to be bold. Some people don't receive it well. You know, most of my, honestly, if I'm super candid, most of the negative feedback has been from Christians who don't like a perspective that I have on Christianity. I shared a post called "I'm a Christian, but I don't do church." And I was sharing how the church is important. Like, the church is part of the biblical calling on our lives is to be a part of the church. And there is a lot of people who said I didn't have a grace in that situation, but I have been hurt badly by the church. My community has been hurt badly. We went to Mars Hill, which was a massive church that blew up because of the pastor's sin, and it still made a massive impact in my life. But there's a lot of people who have used that as a reason to not go to church anymore. And we have to say, look at God and do not look at man, because man will fail. They're going to fall. And so anyway, so the feedback on that was like, you don't have grace, you don't have this. And I've just come to a place where I said, everyone has their perspective. We're all imperfect. I am not going to write things perfectly. Like, just because I'm putting myself out there doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. I will make sure that it lines up with biblical truth to the best of my ability. But also, I'm not going to please everyone, and I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And I think I'm a people pleaser for sure. And so it can be hard for me. But for the most part, I've learned to just focus on the good responses rather than the negative responses. I heard John Mayer, actually randomly, once say that when Beyonce leaves a performance, or he leaves a performance, that they focus on the one negative tweet instead of literally like hundreds of positive tweets. And it's just the human nature to do that, I think. And so for me, I want to be intentional about, like Philippians calls us to focus on the good and the excellent and the lovely, and not on the people who just want to tear down, because it doesn't get you anywhere. You know, and a lot of the time, my heart is like, those people are hurting somewhere else. Like, people hurt people. And so they have a lot going on. And so I tried to just pray for them and have compassion for whatever it is they're going through.
Well, I think that's why I connected with you so much, because I know for myself, I really need to check myself about being like judgmental of other Christians, because I feel like I'm a little more on the truth than the grace side when I speak about certain things. And you know, not everybody likes that. You know, what scares me a little bit with the online space with Christians is there's a bit of watering down happening to kind of appease the masses, which hurts my heart. It really breaks my heart when I see that, because like you say, you're not meant to be everybody's cup of tea, but you're meant to be here and to speak truth. So I think that's why I connected so much with you, because just the way you speak, and like, you're not scared to share some of the hard things. And for myself, I kind of got into blogging. Like, I'm a hairdresser is my background. So
awesome.
It was similar to, you know, I was a stay-at-home mom and I needed another creative outlet, and I kind of got into it that way. And then I was like, God just really spoke to me one day clearly, like, if you're going to be spending the amount of time that you're spending on this, you need to be talking about things that are going to glorify me. And I didn't want to talk. I was, you know, starting the fostering journey, and didn't want to talk about that at all. And I ended up kind of going there, and then I got a lot of negative, like, you're using this to exploit children and it just, you know, there can be hurt people that hurt people. And I got a lot of really negative feedback. And I was like, God, is this really what you want me to be talking about? But at the end of the day, I need to use this platform to glorify God. And that's how I feel about social media. And which brings me into my next question, I guess. I think social media can be a really dark place. Sometimes, you know, full of comparison, a time suck. It can draw us away from things that are really important. So what are your thoughts on that?
First, I want to address you, because I just want to encourage you that, like, it's so much more important to err on the side of righteousness than it is to err on the side of liberalism, maybe is the word. And I think, yes, love is at the forefront of everything that we do. We're called to love our neighbor, but there's also a place of holiness. Like, we're called to holiness. And I think that's really important. And so I'm encouraged by what you're doing, and fostering is no easy task. And I know that instills a compassion and an empathy in a way that some people would never experience. So just thank you for doing that, because that's really amazing. But I would say the dark side of social media. Yeah. I mean, I think I have learned to create a lot of balance, because I wouldn't say I necessarily get sucked into envy. as much as I get sucked into a competitive nature, to where if I see success, and this is me being really candid, if I see success, it's like, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can try and I can do that. And it's prideful, really. And so I've had to come to a place where I say, Lord, again, this is just my motto in my head and my prayer is, Lord, this is yours. This is not mine. So shield me, guard me. And a lot of the time our faith takes intentionality, and it takes an active, we have to be active, not just passive in allowing God to work through us, but we have to respond to his calling. And so for me, that means really balancing my time on social media, because I know a lot of women who do struggle with comparison. I honestly don't really follow bloggers. I don't follow podcasters because I know my weaknesses.
Yeah.
I follow people that I know most of the time. And so that's just knowing their lives. And I have had to create structure, and I think people need to be intentional with their structure, not only for themselves, but also if you have children. Children do what they see, not what you tell them. So you can tell them all the time to get off technology, but until you're off your technology, they're seeing you live your life. And there's so much more out there than just social media. So I think if people are getting sucked in and they're struggling, respond to that. Don't just say, oh, this is a part of my life. It's not, it doesn't need to be. You can live out an active faith, like go face to face and have community with people and serve and be in ministry and love the world. Don't just sit behind a screen. And I'm guilty. I am not calling anyone out. I am totally guilty of it. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. I just came actually from a little moms group that I go to, and I would say she's like my godliest, holiest friend. Like, she just speaks so much truth into my life. She is anti-social media. And I think that's why I love her so much, because, for me, it's part of my ministry, part of my job. Like, I have to be on it. And I blog about being intentional. So I take intentional breaks, and I'm not on stories, and I'm not on, but I know that's kind of a detriment to being in this online space, right? Like, you need to be present, and you need to, so I'm more like, okay, what can I schedule beforehand when the kids are in bed, when, everything that I can plan out and do. But we were just having this conversation this morning, and she's like, I don't know how it's going to be with my kids, because we're just they don't know it, because we don't have it. We're not technology people. And, part of me is really encouraged by that. But part of me is like, this is the way of our world. And if we don't join in this as Christians and bringing our voice to the table, where does that leave us? So I don't know. I just kind of went off on a tangent with that, but
dichotomy. It is. And I think also, I know a lot of people who never got drawn into it. I started on AIM when I was little, in MySpace and all of that stuff. I started young, and the people who weren't involved in it as much, they don't really have that tie to it like I do. But it's hard because I envy that sometimes in them. They don't care if people know what's going on in their lives. And sometimes I'm like, well, what is my meal if you don't know what I'm eating? It's just so stupid. And so you have to battle that, and they don't struggle with that. But then at the same time, it's built an entire world for me. It's my career, and it's my ministry, and it's a platform that I wouldn't have otherwise. And so I think the importance is following convictions and knowing we have to create these boundaries for our children. We have to show them that we know when to turn it off. At the dinner table, our phones are not there. They're not even present. They're gone. And when I'm eye to eye, face to face with my children, they know my phone is not in my hand or with me. Because I heard something recently that said, if your phone is face up on a dinner table, if you're at dinner with somebody and their phone is face up, even if the light isn't showing, do you feel like the most important person at the table? And it's no, you're waiting for someone else to show up, technically.
Exactly.
And I don't want my children to ever feel like they're the second resort. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It's a weird world that we're raising our children in.
Yeah, I agree. The boundaries are so important. It's so funny. We were out to eat the other night, and my husband's looking at the TV on the sports, and we have a no tech at the table rule. And she's like, Daddy, no tech at the table. And he's just, watching the screen that's in the bar part of the restaurant behind us. But it was just so funny. And I just love how, they call us out on it. We're very intentional. Absolutely, the phones don't even come into the kitchen. Worship music goes on them in the other room so we can hear it, but they don't even come into the kitchen when we're eating. But it's just funny to see how they react, right? The next question I have for you is, what has been the best part about your online platform? I think you've spoken to this a little bit, but what is the best part, and how has it maybe improved or affected your relationship with God and with others?
So I think, honestly, the coolest part for me is two-sided. So one is the relationships that it's built for me, like the community. I have a lot of people who will reach out in my city and say, hey, can you do coffee? Like, I'd love to talk. And some people want to share their lives and some people just want to hang out. And I can't do it with everybody, but when I do, it's really nice. Like I always tell them, this is why I do what I do, is so that we can have this face-to-face interaction and I can really hear your story and love you through it. And it's not just behind a screen, because when people come up and say hi, they're like, I had this happen yesterday, actually, where she came up and she was like, isn't this weird that I kind of know your whole life and you know nothing about me? And I said, you know what, honestly, I'm so free from my past and the stories that I've shared that I know there's redemption and I know that there's grace. And so I don't live in that anymore. And so for me, it's just kind of cool, like that you're willing to come up, and she ended up sharing her story with me. And I said, would you have shared that with me had you just met me? No, probably not. People feel so comfortable to share because they know so much about my life and my story. And it's just nice, like, to start there. Like you meet someone and immediately you're friends, like real friends, not in the shallow conversation stage. So that's been cool. And then also, I think one thing that God really pressed on my heart early on was to support and celebrate other women and to not feel as if there's not enough success to go around. Like there is, and we can celebrate one another in different platforms. And to see that in my community, and also to see it just kind of being spread throughout the community, has been so encouraging. Not to say like I was the catalyst, but I think the more you preach something and encourage something, people realize they're not stuck in one frame of mind. And so that has just, it's been really cool for me to see. And then my relationship with God, so many things, sorry. But I would say one thing that's been hard is like, I feel like I'm constantly pouring out. I'm constantly sharing and pouring out. And I am such a believer in counseling and ministry and serving, but I wasn't really being fed because I was so busy. And I'm in a position now actually where I'm going to be fed a lot more. I'm starting a new job at a church, and already this time has been so fruitful for me and has made me realize you cannot be separated from that vine. Like you have to stay in the word. You have to stay in conversation with God all day long. And you need women and men pouring into your life and sharing truth with you so that you can then pour out, because you get to a point, and I got to a point, which is I took a break in December, and that was the point I was at, was where I was saying, like, I'm pulling from conversations and things I learned like 8 months ago. Like, where's my new knowledge? Where's the new inspiration? It's not there because I am not investing. Like I'm draining. I'm draining myself. And so that has been hard. But recently it's challenged me to step up and say, if I'm going to pour out, I need to know what I'm saying, and I need to believe what I'm saying, and I need to have a passion, and I need to share that love for Jesus. And it's a love for God and a fear for God, and those things grow us. And I want to have both, and I want to have them equally. And that means that my relationship with God comes first. And that also means that I don't only have to share about God. Like that's been freeing for me, that I can share about really practical life stuff and not feel guilty about that, because my relationship with Jesus is a solid foundation. So the rest that flows from it is organic.
Amazing. I love that. I love how you say the connecting with people. It's so funny because I like being a foster parent. It can be like a really isolating thing sometime within your own community. Yeah, there's like a few people in my church. I go to a fairly large church, like, but you know, not necessarily people in the same life stage as me, or, you know, it was just hard to connect. And I just started connecting, and I was like, oh, I don't really want to talk about this, but I feel God's calling me to it. And then just like, you know, every day I get emails all the time, and people, like you say, like, oh, I feel like I know you. Anyways, this random girl, she ended up ordering something from my shop, and we become such great friends. She ends up living like just a city over, and like we just totally connected. And she's like, is this weird, but do you want to come over for tea? My husband's like, make sure you call me, and this isn't like psycho. But
with you.
Exactly. But it was just so beautiful, the relationships that have been able to come out of it. And that's why I'm a strong advocate for social media. Can, you know, there definitely needs to be boundaries and parameters that you set, but it is so beautiful. And I think as God's, like, we can use it for his good and to glorify him and to build these relationships and to strengthen other Christians, right? So I just love that you shared that. And your relationship with God, like, I think for me, when you're holding yourself to a standard, you're being a teacher. And, you know, it says in the Bible, when you're a teacher, you're called to a higher standard. So I think it does, like, you're strengthening yourself almost against your platform, if that makes sense. Like, like you say, you have to pour into yourself. You can't just constantly going back over old things, and, you know, you need new fruit and new and fresh perspective. So I love that you shared that so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsey. That's all the questions I have for you today. I appreciate you being here so much. Let my listeners know where they can find you on social media.
Well, thank you so much for having me, first off. It's so fun. This stuff is so fun for me. I honestly don't get interviewed a lot. I just do a lot of interviews. Yeah. So I need to start saying yes more to this stuff because it's fun for me. But so you can find me, my newest journey is the Living Easy podcast, and you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm talking about practical things like meal planning and budgeting and getting out of the house with kids, like just practical things. But I also dig into marriage and strengthening your faith and growing and not being afraid to talk about sex and things that the church doesn't talk about enough.
I love that.
And just diving in. It's just so fun for me. And then you can also find me on Instagram at lindsey.maestas, which is hard to spell, but you can figure it out.
I'll link to everything in the show notes.
And then my website is sparrowsandthelily.com. And I have a ton of recipes and faith posts and all kinds of just fun lifestyle stuff.
And 2 adorable little boys, I must say, that you have.
Thank you. They're the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, Lindsey.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this interview with Lindsey. Definitely go give her a follow on her social medias. Check out her blog. She's got some awesome recipes, in particular a cranberry jalapeno dip that I just made this weekend that was phenomenal. But thank you so much for being here today, for listening to the podcast and supporting the podcast. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. I'm just going to end in a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much, God. Thank you for everything that you do for us. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for always being there for us, Lord, somebody that we can talk to at any moment. When things are good, when things are bad, Lord, you're always there. Just a quick conversation away, Lord. Just help us to be connected to you, to be deep in prayer, to be connecting without you throughout our days, Lord, and to be mindful of you when we are posting on social media and communicating with others across the world, or maybe in just the next state or city over, Lord, but using the gift of social media to glorify you, God. Help us to do that as women of Christ, as followers of Lord God. We just want to glorify you in all that we do, and even in the little things. I just ask that you help us with that. Just thank you for all the blessings that you've given to myself and to each of the people listening today, Lord. And I just ask blessings and favor upon these women. And I ask that you bring us all back together again safely next week so we can learn more about this topic and how we can glorify you, God, even in something as small as our social media use. In Jesus' heavenly name I pray. Amen. Until next week, friends, be blessed. Love your family well. Bye.